I am Napoleon Bonaparte, born on August 15, 1769, on the island of Corsica, a French territory that had been annexed from Genoa just before my birth. My journey from an obscure island to the heights of power in France and across Europe was driven by ambition, military brilliance, and an unwavering belief in my destiny. My life is a story of triumph and tragedy, conquest and exile, and the shaping of modern Europe. Though I came from a noble family, our Corsican origins did not grant us the same standing in France as the aristocrats of the mainland. My father, Carlo Bonaparte, was a lawyer, and my mother, Letizia, was a strong-willed woman who instilled in me a sense of discipline and purpose. When I was 9, I was sent to mainland France to study at the Royal Military School in Brienne, and then later in Paris at the École Militaire. There, I developed a reputation for being highly intelligent and fiercely determined. At the military academy, I studied the art of war, excelling in mathematics, history, and geography, disciplines essential for a future officer. I graduated as a second lieutenant in the artillery at just 16 years old. It was during this time that I began to see the world in terms of strategy and power. I was determined to rise above the limitations of my birth and seize every opportunity that presented itself. The outbreak of the French Revolution in 1789 provided me with that opportunity. France was in turmoil, and the old structures of monarchy and nobility were crumbling. While many of my peers were swept up in the chaos, I saw the revolution as a chance to prove myself. I aligned myself with the revolutionary ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity, though I viewed them through a pragmatic lens. I knew that in a world turned upside down, fortunes could be made and lost quickly. In 1793, at the Siege of Toulon, I first made my mark as a brilliant military tactician. Toulon had fallen into the hands of Royalists and British forces. As a young artillery officer, I devised a plan to retake the city by positioning the artillery in such a way that it would force the British fleet to retreat. The plan succeeded, and I was promoted to brigadier general at just 24 years old. My rapid rise did not go unnoticed. In 1796, the French government, now under the Directory, appointed me commander of the French army in Italy. I was given a ragtag army, poorly supplied and demoralized, but I transformed it into a disciplined fighting force. My Italian campaign became legendary. In a series of lightning-fast victories, I defeated the Austrian and Piedmontese forces, forcing them to sign peace treaties that significantly expanded French influence in Italy. I adopted the strategy of rapid movement and decisive action, often attacking the enemy before they could organize their defenses. I also won the loyalty of my troops by sharing in their hardships and rewarding them for their successes. It was during this campaign that I began to develop a belief in my own invincibility, a belief that would both propel me to great heights and later lead to my downfall. In 1798, I led an ambitious campaign to Egypt, hoping to disrupt British trade routes to India and expand French influence in the East. While I won several battles, including the famous Battle of the Pyramids, the campaign ultimately faltered. My fleet was destroyed by the British at the Battle of the Nile, cutting me off from reinforcements and supplies. Despite the setbacks, I used the Egyptian campaign to further my image as a leader who could achieve the impossible. By 1799, France was once again in crisis. The Directory was weak and corrupt, and the country was at risk of internal collapse. Sensing an opportunity, I returned to France and, with the help of political allies, orchestrated the coup of 18 Brumaire on November 9, 1799. I dissolved the Directory and established the consulate, appointing myself as first consul, effectively making me the leader of France. I set about reforming France with the same energy and decisiveness that I had shown on the battlefield. I centralized power, reorganized the government, and implemented reforms that would modernize France. One of my greatest achievements was the creation of the Napoleonic Code in 1804, a comprehensive set of civil laws that remains the foundation of French law to this day. It abolished feudal privileges, ensured property rights, and introduced a merit-based system of government. I also sought to stabilize France's economy, creating the Bank of France, and signed the Concordat of 1801 with the Catholic Church, which restored some of the Church's influence while maintaining the state's dominance in religious matters. These reforms earned me the loyalty of much of the French populace, who saw me as the leader capable of bringing stability after years of revolutionary chaos. In 1804, I took the bold step of proclaiming myself Emperor of the French. The French Senate had already granted me the title, and in a grand ceremony at Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, I placed the imperial crown on my own head, symbolizing that my power came not from divine right, but from my own achievements and the will of the people. France was now an empire, and I was its ruler. With the title of emperor came a renewed focus on expanding French power across Europe. The Napoleonic Wars began in earnest, as I faced coalitions of European powers determined to contain my ambitions. My military genius was again on display in battles such as Austerlitz in 1805, where I defeated a combined Austrian and Russian army in what is often regarded as one of my greatest victories. The speed and decisiveness of my attacks, along with my ability to anticipate the enemy's moves, made me a feared and respected commander. Over the next few years, I expanded the French Empire to its greatest extent, controlling much of Europe either through direct rule or alliances. I created a network of satellite states and installed members of my family on various European thrones, further cementing my influence. However, my ambition knew no bounds, and this ultimately led to my downfall. In 1812, I embarked on a disastrous campaign to invade Russia. I believed that by defeating Russia, I could force the last remaining continental power to bow to my will. I assembled the Grande Armée, the largest force Europe had ever seen, and marched toward Moscow. But Russia's vast distances, harsh climate, and the scorched earth tactics employed by the Russian forces took a terrible toll on my army. Though I captured Moscow, the Russian army refused to surrender. With winter approaching and no means of resupplying my troops, I was forced to retreat. The retreat from Russia was catastrophic. Starvation, exposure, and constant attacks by Russian forces decimated my army. Of the 600,000 men who had marched into Russia, fewer than 100,000 made it back to France. This defeat marked the beginning of the end for me. My enemies, sensing my vulnerability, formed a new coalition and launched a series of attacks on my empire. In 1814, after a series of defeats, I was forced to abdicate and was exiled to the island of Elba off the coast of Italy. Yet my story was not over. In 1815, I escaped from Elba and returned to France in what would become known as the 100 Days. When I landed in France, I was met not with resistance, but with cheering crowds. The army sent to arrest me instead rallied to my side, and I once again marched on Paris, reclaiming the throne. My return reignited the fears of the European powers, who quickly formed another coalition against me. In June of 1815, I faced them at the Battle of Waterloo. Despite my best efforts, I was defeated by the combined British and Prussian forces under the command of the Duke of Wellington and General Blucher. Waterloo marked the final end of my rule. I abdicated once more, this time for good. Rather than being executed, I was exiled to the remote island of St Helena in the South Atlantic, where I would spend the remaining years of my life. My years in exile were spent in reflection. I dictated my memoirs and defended my legacy, emphasizing my achievements and the reforms I had brought to France and Europe. Though I had been defeated, I remained convinced that I had acted in the best interest of France, always driven by my vision of a united and strong Europe under French leadership. I spent much of my time in isolation, with only a few loyal companions for company. The conditions on St Helena were harsh, and I often felt the weight of loneliness and frustration at being removed from the world of politics and warfare. On May 5, 1821, I died on St Helena, likely from stomach cancer, though there has been speculation about other causes. My death was the end of an era, but not the end of my influence. In 1840, my remains were returned to France and entombed in Les Invalides in Paris, where I remain a symbol of French pride and ambition. Looking back, I see my life as a paradox. I was both a revolutionary and a dictator, a conqueror and a reformer. My military campaigns reshaped Europe, but it was my legal and social reforms that left the most lasting impact. The Napoleonic Code continues to influence legal systems around the world, and my efforts to centralize and modernize government laid the foundation for the modern French state. While my ambition led to great victories, it also brought about my downfall. I sought to reshape the world according to my vision, but in the end, I was undone by the very forces I sought to control. Yet, even in defeat, I remain a figure who captured the imagination of millions. My name is synonymous with both glory and tragedy, with the rise and fall of empires. I am Napoleon Bonaparte, Emperor of the French, and my story is one of ambition, power, and the indomitable will to shape history.